Okay, I think it's time. Welcome to this webinar on mastering your student lead nurturing strategy. My name is Louise Allerud, and I am very excited to be hosting this session with an expert on student recruitment, who also happens to be a former colleague of mine, Chris Smart. I'll let Chris introduce himself properly in a minute. First of all, a bit of housekeeping. Audio is muted for all participants. And if you want to ask questions, please do so in the Q&A tab. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send the recording to all of you early next week. If you need support during the webinar, please send an email to the address listed here. Okay, so before we get started, I want to tell you a bit about myself. I head up the recruit team here at Keystone, and I will talk a bit more about that later during the webinar. I have worked with student recruitment since 2009, including recruiting master students for one of the world's largest international business schools. For the majority of my career, I've been managing recruitment teams and trying to understand what the best strategies for attracting potential students are. Chris and I aim to have an interesting and lively conversation and give some useful tips and best practice ideas, and of course to answer any of your questions. But first of all, Chris, thank you so much for joining. Maybe you could tell the audience a bit about who you are and your experience.
Sure thing. Thank you, Louisa. So my name is Chris Smart. As you can see, like Louisa, I've worked in admissions and enrollment for many, many years now, long enough to see the shift that's happened, I would say, over the past 10 years. I've worked for new programs around Europe. I've worked for global admissions teams, both for for-profit, private equity-backed companies, and for public institutions. So I've been around a little bit, and I'm very happy to share what I've learned here today.
Thank you very much, Chris. We'll hear more from Chris very soon. So, okay, let's get started. For colleges and universities globally, admission of international students has transformed from an unpredictable bonus to an essential requirement. International students will not just walk up and show up in your classroom. They will have to be enticed into campuses. Prospective students have so many options and can pick and choose from different countries and universities. In higher education, prospective students are potential customers. And for that reason, the basic elements of sales and customer engagement apply. Find out what they want and make sure that you present a compelling offer with your product or service. I know sales can be a negatively charged word, especially amongst academics. However, it is necessary for you to get your team in a sales mindset, as recruitment in this day and age is tough and very competitive. Personally, I think the best way to approach this is to put yourself in the shoes of the candidate. What does your student journey look like? So lead nurturing began as simply receiving an application before deadline and sending out an acceptance or a rejection letter. Job done. However, engaging with your potential customers proved to be something that actually worked. Who knew? As I mentioned, you want to be thinking through their whole customer journey from start to finish and map out touch points and campaigns for various parts of that journey. In lead nurturing, we are referring to a well-planned strategy for simply ensuring that the lead is literally nurtured throughout their journey. How can you wow them and make them have an emotional connection with your brand? So email templates for various parts of their journey are good, but also interesting content about campus, student life, and job opportunities. There are all sorts of ways to engage. And even if it feels ad hoc for the student, it can actually be planned with some precision and very specific intent. And last but not least, call them. Let them hear a friendly voice. Remember that a lot of young people have never been abroad, and they need some reassurance that they get this support in making this very important decision. Okay, and so to illustrate the competitive nature of the current recruitment landscape, have a look at this survey that we conducted with over 20,000 students. You can see the high number of different institutions potential students are applying to. And we also saw in the same survey that students start seeking information between 7 to 24 months before even sending in the first application. And this tells us that you need to have a solid long-term plan to attract the best students. And the worst thing that you can do now in this current situation is to put your recruitment efforts on hold. You need to build up your pool of prospective students so that you and your institution can hit the ground running when the world opens up again. And Chris, I want to ask you as well, looking at these numbers from this survey, does this surprise you, or is this something that you are also experiencing?
No, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I think it's par for the course these days. In the old days, of course, people used to apply to multiple institutions, but that was more commonly to have a primary choice and then to have a backup option. I think increasingly now people apply to multiple institutions, not as a backup, but because they're truly interested in the institutions and they want to get a feel for things. Yeah. The reality is that the expectations on education are so much higher than they used to be. There is a huge expectation that an institution will provide knowledge and insight and something more than just what's on the academic list of achievements. And so I think this is why they apply to multiple ones. And some institutions do an amazing job at reaching out.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And what is your experience with international recruitment and changing to a more aggressive recruitment strategy?
I think it all comes back to the fact that in the old days, international education was really for the elite. Most of the applicants came from very international families. Their parents may have studied internationally, but with the global rise of the emerging middle class, most international students will be the first generation, let's say. Just as I might have been the first person in my family to go to a university, a lot of the kids these days will be the first to go to study internationally. So they don't have a lot of inbuilt knowledge. Just imagine, your inbuilt knowledge of the university system in your country. They have nothing. They've got no frame of reference. Nobody's mentioned it. There's no friendly uncle or aunt who's explained things. If they're super lucky, they may have a friend there. So they really need a super large amount of information, both data, statistics, but also just to get a feel for things. I mean, they're applying from half a world away. So yeah, I think they're very, very needy compared to domestic applications. And there's a high expectation to meet those needs.
Yes, I agree. And we're going to talk a bit more about these things as well. So let's see how we can set up a framework for student recruitment and what key components that you need to think about here. So lead source, where are you getting your leads from? Is it from student fairs, paid or organic search, or companies like Keystone with 55 million unique visitors each year? And I think it's also important to think about who are you actually trying to attract? Do you have a target demographic or target markets? And do you have a plan to reach these? Another thing that's important to think about is find your USPs or your unique selling points. Think about what makes you stand out and highlight this in all your communication. And have a clear marketing strategy. Make sure that you leave no leave behind and that they're getting enough love in all the different application stages. And another good tip is creating that sense of urgency. Are you prompting the candidates into action? Something like having multiple deadlines or a reason for them to apply early. And don't forget your application. An application does not equal a student in class. So have a plan for them also after the application is sent in. And alumni are your best weapon. And a good idea is to create an amazing alumni network. No one will sell your school as well as a happy student. And I wanted to ask you, Chris, after your conversations with thousands of students, what are the most common questions that students ask? And what kind of information do they need before they make a decision?
It's a big question. It really is. I mean, the first thing that springs to mind actually is how surprisingly immature their knowledge can be. I've spoken to, you speak to a student at the very, very end of the process, and they've still got, for me, what could be quite elementary questions, because students can go through the whole process knowing very little, just almost like by, inertia, just by gravity. They float through, but they've never really addressed themselves some core questions, and the institution has never poked them to ask them those questions. So, I mean, in general, I think there's a lot of stats out there. Lots of students have looked at the websites. There's lots of rankings. There's lots of stats, and some of them like that and they focus on it. But I think the questions, when you can get the students on the phone, which can be a luxury, of course, time luxury, but when you do get them on the phone, most of the time they just want to get a sense of the institution. And scarily for me, at the beginning of my career, I became the face of that institution. It's a big responsibility. If I'm friendly, the institution must be friendly. If I'm cold, distant, and hurried, then the institution must be cold, distant, and hurried. So just putting a face to the school or university or program and getting to know what they're interested in, I think is really what they want. They want to be heard, and they want to feel as if they'll be listened to when they're actually in class.
Yeah. Do you think that we tend to forget how young some of these prospective students are when they are in this decision-making process?
I think there's just a general very, very poor understanding of students in general. I mean, the student is also not the only stakeholder. The parents, friends, enormous stakeholders. I think in general, we have a hugely imperfect understanding of why students choose our organizations. We might tell ourselves stories. We might say, oh, I'm sure it's because we're ranked first for this subject, and it's of course because we're in this delightful city. But in terms of a real knowledge, no, it's hugely imperfect, and it's our job to try and chip away at that. You can't speak to every student. I mean, it would be a wonderful world if you could, but you cannot. So the question is, how do you identify the ones you need to speak to, which will be the efficient ones, and which are the ones who will teach you something about how you're positioned, I guess. Yeah. Very big question.
Okay. I want to have a look at the student journey because it gives us so many opportunities to connect with them and to communicate with them. And I think that the majority of schools and universities, they don't take advantage of this. So I wanted to kind of go through and discuss from the student lead, when you're actually receiving the inquiry. What do you think is the best way to interact with that student in the beginning?
I think it's a question of responsiveness at the start. Again, you can't see what the student is doing on the other end of the application. They may be casually sending applications. They may have been super focused. They may have done their research for, months or years before they've even sent the first email, or it could just be a casual, oh yeah, I'm interested, I'll ping you a message from my mobile. But I think it's super important to be very, very responsive.
Yeah.
Again, the days where you apply and then you hear nothing for 6 months and then you get an acceptance, they're long gone. Even if you still are, the competitor institutions are being super proactive. So responding to initial applications quickly, it's a very strong indication of what the university or the school is like in general. If you respond fast, that speaks to the entire organization, I think.
Yeah.
If it's just received and then they get an automated email, that tells me that the university is maybe, negatively, it's, well, maybe they're super busy. Maybe I'm not going to be important for them and they don't care about me. So speed of response, super important. Just let you know that, yes, I've got your application. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And how often do you think that you should send an email, for example, to a student in that first phase from asking for more information until they start the application? How bold should you be in that marketing strategy?
Yeah, I mean, bold is the word, right? I guess the fear is that you move beyond bold to aggressive. And for institutions, as you said, sales is almost like a dirty word. The fear is that you're going to be super aggressive, it turns people off, and it's unproductive. I think the truth is that you don't really persuade people to move faster. People move at their own speed. Student applications move at their own speed, to a great extent, but you need to be there when they need you. And sending an email and just leaving them to it is not going to fly. So being in touch quickly, giving them structure. Again, university applications are not a transparent process. It's very intimidating. There's very little knowledge. Maybe if you do a lot of research, you can figure out, how many students get rejected, but that tells you very little. So just letting them know where they are is very helpful. It's not spamming them with information. It's telling them, you're here. This is what's coming next. This is what we're doing now. And by the way, if you're still on the fence, we have a webinar now. This is very valuable information. I don't think it's pushy at all. I think it's very, very valuable for students.
Yeah, and you really see when you go into a website as well, and I've seen several hundred, it's not always easy to find the information you're looking for. And sometimes you can't even find where to apply if you were a student who wanted to apply. Do you think that this is a common issue?
It's a hugely common issue. I think, again, 10 years ago, the problem was that the information was not on websites. Now the information is there, but there's no hierarchy. There's no clarity. The amount of times that I've browsed courses on behalf of my students or just for my own due diligence, and I can see the individual credit requirements, I can see the course specifications in minutiae. And if I'm interested, I don't have a place to click. I mean, what's the call to action? This is the biggest mistake everyone makes. It's like, here's all this lovely information about the school, and then nothing. And so there's no button to say, oh, well, you've watched this wonderful video of existing students. Click here if you want to speak to them. There's no, it's just very, very passive is my problem with most websites.
Yeah. And going back to the emailing, how fast is it acceptable in your book to ask them to start the application?
It's very simple for me. I don't think there's any tension between boldness or aggressiveness and what's good for the student. The sooner they start the application, the more information they will get. It's good for, I think it's always a win-win. It's better for us transparently, because we see what our pipeline of students is. We get to pick the best students, and we know which students we like, and we can start doing our projections and then involving all our internal stakeholders. But it truly is better for the student too. The sooner you start an application, the sooner that they can meet alumni, the sooner that they can get all the relevant information. There's no hard sell. Students will go to university when they can go to university. They won't go before. But it's just a question of the sooner you start, the better informed your decision can be, and the less of a rush it can be. You know, I come from a country, the UK, which has a clearing system every summer, which is absolute anarchy. Everybody hates it, institutions and students alike. And the more you can do, you know, informed decision making before then, the better.
Yeah, yeah. And when you get to that stage that, okay, I've made my decision, I want to apply, how can you make that process easy for the student? Because here we also have a lot of very complicated ways, and lots of students drop off in this stage, and not just because they're not interested, it's just too complicated. Do you have any tips on how to make this a bit smoother for the student?
Sure. I think so. First of all, I like that you've accepted that. I think it's you have to accept that. Nobody's excited to apply. Nobody's excited to get copies of their passports and transcripts. It's a pain in the ass, to be perfectly frank. So the reason why people drop off is because they're living their lives. They're busy doing what they're doing. A lot of the students are taking their exams. This is serious stuff. So expecting them to merrily send you high school transcripts and references and everything else is unrealistic. So that's why people drop off. What can you do to combat it? Again, I think keeping people engaged by having a good nurturing strategy, whether it's a lead nurturing strategy, should not stop when they become whatever you call the next stages of your pipeline. So they should be nurtured beyond then. I think the quickest win for me is, again, just giving them structure. Thank you for applying. This is what we're now going to ask you for. These are everything that we'll ask you for. This is the timeline in which it needs to be done. And then what really makes a difference is asking them what they think. Do you think it's feasible? And then you're not chasing 1,000 people who are getting increasingly tired of hearing from you. And you're not chasing people because you've not got time to chase people. So you just let them work. But as long as you know the timeline that they're working to, I think it usually works out in the end.
Yeah, and I think a lot of institutions also give up. They think those students that don't complete, they're not worth chasing, they're not good enough students, or they don't want this enough. What do you think about that statement?
I understand it. I think that we've all got limited resources. Not everybody, you can't call every single student and chase them. I totally get that. At the same time, I have stopped being surprised by students who return from the dead and who suddenly come back alive and responsive after, you know, an age where they've been super unresponsive. Because again, you don't know what's happening in their lives. They may have they may stress of exam retakes or anything else. So it's just making sure that you're there when they want to re-engage. You can't make them engage, you can't make them re-engage, but if you've just cut them adrift, you've just given up any hope that you'll move forward. And in terms of lead funnel, you know, a student who's taken the trouble to apply is so much more valuable than starting afresh and going to a new fair and getting new leads into the pipeline. So just being there when they need you to be there, making sure that you're still engaging with them, either actively or passively, or adding value to them, which is very low effort, I think. The baseline is very low for adding value in the admissions process. So adding some value, and I think you'll have good outcomes.
Yes, and we're going to talk about calling the leads in the beginning a little bit later. But in this stage where you're collecting the documents, how effective do you think it is to also reach out to the students by phone at this stage to support them and help them and answer questions?
Very, simply because there's differences in terms of different cultures and how they like to interact, but I think it's a pretty global phenomenon that nobody is super forthcoming and honest via email. They're also a little bit paranoid. If I've applied to this, you know, August, very well respected institution, I don't want to send them an email saying, hey, you know, I'm going skiing next week, and I'm finishing my exam, so I'm going to party for the week after that. So maybe I'll get my stuff to you in a couple of weeks. maybe, maybe they think that the head of admissions is going to personally look at that application and give them a black mark. They've got no idea. So just providing a friendly voice and saying, hey, when is it possible for you to do this? And they say, okay, maybe this is possible. You say, no problem at all.
Right.
So again, engaging with them. It doesn't have to be live. I mean, I've done an increasing amount of that type of conversation just via WhatsApp. Because again, it's just a small tip of getting people on the phone sometimes for the younger generation is quite formal. Setting a time to speak is something that you do with your bank. So if moving to calling was one evolution, I think that also increasingly just messaging people on social messaging platforms is seen as a less serious, less intimidating, and you get more of the truth and more of the reality from students in the process.
Yeah, yeah. And let's say that we have completed this application, and you have all the documents in. How would you recommend the people listening to follow up with that student after? Is that, okay, job done, let's just wait until that person comes and shows up in class?
I've seen it done like that. Again, we tend to think of the process just from our perspective. So we've asked them for X, Y, and Z. They've completed X, Y, and Z. So we will now give them, a confirmation, and then that they will accept. The truth is, of course, is that they've complied with your requests because they have to, and they feel that they have to. But are they sold on your institution or on this course versus a competitor program? Absolutely not. So if you were to be very aggressive, you would make sure that you were hitting other KPIs other than yours. So are you hitting their KPIs, whether they've asked to or not, crucially? So have you at least offered them a tour, virtual or otherwise? Have they been offered to speak to a current student or alumni? Do they have do they have the necessary information? And again, the reality is that some people are very loud. They will ask for it. They will say, my name is Chris and I want X, Y, Z, and I want you to introduce me to this. And they're very demanding. Other people are not. Other people are just sort of quiet. They sit there, and if you don't or give them the chance, they won't ask. But if a competitor gives them the chance, that's why they'll choose the competitor. So I think that you have to be aware that every student has their own KPIs that you need when they apply.
Yeah, and how important do you think it is to connect them with, as you say, a virtual tour to the campus or other students to create that emotional connection?
In a word, very. Again, there's always going to be a significant amount of students who have done their research. They've chosen the university that they want to go to. Maybe they've got friends and family there. Maybe it's in the same city that they want to be in or where they live. And there's always those students who come to you and say, again, my name's Chris and I've done my research for the last 5 years and I've chosen your institution because of this metric. It's totally, those students exist. But a lot of students are open to persuasion, and they want to understand what is good about this institution versus otherwise. And this is something that I really dislike currently. We've as an industry, we've tried to combat this by giving them more information, but the information is very stats heavy, and you'd have to be, you could sit with an Excel spreadsheet and say, okay, well, this university is ranked 4th in this subject, and this university is ranked 6th, but this program has got a 56%. But it's very, very, numerical based. But what I think they really crave is, again, that personal connection. So whether it's as simple as just a virtual tour or offers of physical tours, just to give them that emotional connection. And I think that's where you really start to see manifest increases in conversion rates and in application rates. And not to get too off topic, better managed expectations of the students when they do arrive at your university. And this is where the professors start getting excited by all of this salesy type process.
Yeah. And you see that as well with the online programs, that they crave this personal interaction. You know, they want to be in groups where they can work with other students and have one-on-ones with professors. So I think these things are very, very important. You mentioned it a little bit, you know, what happens when you actually show up, you know, either online or at campus. How can we make that experience memorable? You know, something that creates an instant connection and that will make that student, you know, promote your brand to other students and prospective students next year, for example.
Well, I think that's the holy grail, right? That's the ultimate goal. Because again, like, we keep talking about how it would be lovely if you could call every single student and hold their hand through the process. It's not feasible. But what you're talking about is one way to make a truly sustainable recruitment process. You know, if you have students who have their eyes open because of the transparency of the admissions process, because of the information given to them by the institution, they will have their expectations managed. They will join the university that they want to. They will be happy students, and they will be net promoters. Net promoter score is something that a lot of companies use these days. Universities don't, but it's exactly the same principle. Students who are happy are net promoters for the university, and they will stop you from starting from scratch every single year, because they will promote to their friends and through their networks.
What do you think about using alumni for admissions and recruitment purposes? So, for example, doing the admissions interview with an alumni of the school.
I love it. I think that, again, as in sales and marketing, we like to put our, best face and best foot forward. I think there's a lot of suspicion around that. If there's no university website that I can go to that says, we're okay, we're not the best, not the worst. Everyone is the best at something, which might be true. But the truth is that students also they like a sense of realism. They like to hear from alumni that says, it is amazing here. Yeah, but it's true. The restaurant just across the road, awful. Don't go there. It just gives a little bit.
It's authentic.
Right.
Yes.
You want to. It's just the truth, right? And I think, again, a good admissions process is as open, transparent, and honest as possible. So if they get to hear from somebody who's not just like a marketing person saying we're amazing, but if they get to hear from somebody, and if that process has that, I think it's very, very valuable.
I think that's also the power of social media, that if you have happy students with amazing experiences, then the world will know.
And vice versa. If they don't hear from you about something, they'll hear it from social media. If they don't hear from you that, well, we're increasing in X, Y, and Z, we're not where we want to be yet, but we're really putting a lot of energy into improving our student experience, they will go to a website and hear about, irate past students saying something, and then you've lost control of the narrative for those. So it's very, very damaging equally on the other side.
And just to finish up about the alumni, do you have any ideas on how to keep this community going year on year? How can you keep them tight and happy?
Yes, actually. So I think this is something that they do in the States really, really well. Compared to I'll just compare the UK to the States very briefly. In the States, people have got a lot of sense of belonging to the institutions that they go to. In the UK, it's a little bit more of a cold, distant relationship. One thing that they do super well in the States is that they really attract promoters internally. And I think that they empower them to do so. Some students are hugely proactive. Some of them are future business leaders, politicians, social media. Some of them are already social media influencers for the last 15 years of their lives. And so there is a significant amount of people who will love to represent. And this will, it's almost like a partnership. They increase their personal brand, by reflecting your brand. And I think a lot of people are open to this. So if you ask them, they will be raised hands, I think.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on to the next slides. I also wanted to just mention CRM system. How important do you think it is to have a system in place where you can track all your student inquiries and also everything that is happening on that student journey?
I'm just about old enough to remember when the first basic CRMs were being used. I'm happily not old enough that I don't remember any CRMs being used, but I can remember when they were very basic, and I'm very happy that those days are very, very long gone for a variety of reasons. How important is it? I think it's just the fundamental that you need to do everything else that we've talked about today. You know, again, you can't call everybody, you can't email everybody every single day. So understanding where people are, getting the data and using the data in the most important way is absolutely critical. I have worked for institutions where this was a very new concept. Conversely, there are institutions out there right now that are very, very, very advanced, that are very close to the corporate world in terms of how they work. There are institutions out there right now that can tell you that this year, if a student hasn't sent their documents within 17 days, the chances that they'll apply will drop by 46%. Some people are really on the money with this. So I think getting a CRM and teaching it to speak to you and to tell you what you need to know is critical.
Yeah, and you can also use CRMs to send out these emails and making sure that you have communication coming out in different stages of the process as well.
Yeah, there's a lot that can be automated, and again, there's a lot that needs to be automated. When you have thousands of applications, you need to make sure that you're covering all bases. You can't hire a team of 100 people to manage it. I've not seen that institution yet, so yeah, very important.
Great. Okay, so I want to look at some best practices as well, and I know that we've already mentioned a little bit, but let's start off by a couple of lead nurturing examples. So we've talked about calling, online campus tours, webinars, online masterclasses, meet a current student, Q&A with alumni. And these are all great ideas on how to interact via email and social media and calling. Do you have any examples that you can think of where you have had success in connecting with the candidates and what works?
Well, it wasn't really it's nothing that we've not mentioned, but I do remember that we had a team responsible for recruiting in Scandi, in the Nordics, and which was a relatively small region. So I think they seemed to be ahead of the game in terms of that personalization. And they had fantastic conversion. They had a very large amount of students that applied would come to the school and they'd be very happy. So, of course, in Central, we wanted to sort of investigate, find out what they were doing so well, and to see if there was anything that we could copy paste across the rest of the world. It turns out that they were introducing applicants to professors. And that was, oh, wow, that's amazing, and it sounds amazing, and it's wonderful. And then you get all excited about it, and then you go back to Central and you tell everyone, and you're like, but we can't do that globally. We can't introduce, we don't have we need to hire professors just to speak to students. It's so, but it's such a good little nugget, and we love it, but we can't do that. But what we could do was introduce a series of webinars where the professors could meet the students. And these are super low effort. I think in the end, we said every single Wednesday from April to July, a professor will be online at this specific time, again, every Wednesday, to talk to students about how it works and what they think and their feedback. And she'll also mention maybe a little bit about the admissions or whatever. Just having that once per week had a huge benefit across the entire organization. I don't think we could quite replicate how powerful it was to individually introduce every student to an individual professor, but we got a good chunk of the way there, and it, the resource cost again was minimal. So that's just one example of finding the conversion rate differences. Some regions are really good at overall leads, some are very good at conversion, and just trying to find out what can be shared between them is probably one of the magic tricks.
And it's a lot of work, as we know, setting up a webinar and finding content. How do you think that we could use current students, for example, Q&A? Is that something that you would recommend?
Yeah, but I think perversely, frequency also helps with how, if you set up one webinar, then you do it from scratch, you have to plan, you have to prepare. I remembered when I used to be a teacher, the first class that I ever taught, I probably took about 20 hours preparing every single 5-minute segment of that class. By the 100th time that I delivered the class, it's all up and running. So frequency helps here. And again, you've ticked that box of, are you nurturing the leads throughout the process? Because again, it keeps happening. So yes, whether it's any content at all, whether it's virtual guided tours, whether it's professors, whether it's alumni, just having something in frequently will make a big difference.
Yeah. One thing that I also want to mention here is, do you have enough leads? And we were talking about different ways to get enough leads, and thinking about the conversion rate. How many leads do you actually need to end up with X amount of applications? Do you have any best practice ideas on how to reach out to international students?
That can be covered in less than 17 hours or so. I think the one thing that I would just say is just review what you're doing. Every institution I've ever worked for, you can walk in and say, okay, what do you do to get leads? And it's this list. And these are often things that the people have just done forever. And why do you go to this fair? Well, this is because we've always been to this fair. Or my predecessor always did this. There's just this huge legacy of, but this is what we always do. So just reviewing how effective it is. Again, keep coming back to this time and resource question, but maybe this is a terrible use of your time. Maybe this market is already ticked because you'll get the student applications anyway. Maybe you should be going to a fair where you're not getting students from. Maybe you shouldn't just say, well, we don't get students from this region, so forget it. Maybe you should shift there to have a net gain in leads. So just reviewing what you're using. Please making sure that you don't just wait for students to apply and just walk in through the door. There are many companies out there right now, yours being one of them, that students are using to shop around and to do some window shopping and get some knowledge. You have to be where the students are looking. You have to be in the same, but it's like being in the mall in the 60s. You have to be in the mall with your samples for people to see your product. We have to be in the right spaces for the students to find us.
And I think we also talked about, is your website compelling and easy to navigate? So we cover that quite well, but just to repeat a bit there, emphasize on that it's easy to find information about the programs, how to apply, what kind of documents you need. Is there anything else that you would like to add there as important things to think about?
Just call to actions. Again, I think everyone's got a pretty website these days. Most of us have a pretty website, but what's the call to action on every single page? I mean, I'm exaggerating slightly now, but there should always be everywhere. Did you like this? Click here to learn more and to register to find out more. There should always be a very clear narrative of how you want people to engage. Otherwise, people look at it, they might say, wow, that's great. And then where do they go next? Who knows? So just help them out a little bit. People are browsing many different websites, 1,000 universities. They're all #1 in something. They've all got these shiny graphics and smiling, happy students. They all merge into one. help them out, give them a lifeline, and give them something to click where they can then progress.
Yeah. And and that is, creating that emotional connection as well that we talked about. For the emailing, how fast, when do you think we should send the first email? I am a student, I inquire I want more information about your program. When should you reach out to that student?
If it's longer than 24 hours, I think you've missed a trick.
Right.
And it doesn't need to be personalized hugely at the beginning. But I think that is the critical time. Sometimes people, they build themselves up to apply, they send the application, and then they think, job done. Now I can relax. And then the danger is that then they can disappear. And then you send them an email a few days later saying, oh, hey, we got this, and these are the next steps. And you've lost a little bit of that fire and energy and the motivation, the will to continue. So they've just responded to you, you can be responsive to them. So very, very quickly. Again, even if it's automated, even if it's just to say, hey, Louisa, thank you so much for applying. Somebody will get in contact with you. This is the process. This is how it works. And these will be the next steps. I think you must do. It's not an option, I don't think.
And do you think, and I know the answer, but the first email, should that be a long email with all the information about the school and everything you need to know? Or do you think it makes more sense to have a lot of emails with, relevant information for each stage of the student?
Yeah, well, nobody likes the wall of text, right? I don't like the wall of text, and I'm probably considered an old man for most university applicants these days. So no, it shouldn't be a huge, here is everything, while we try to frighten you as much as possible into reading the email. But it should be it should still have a decent overview of what's necessary. You don't need to include everything. It should be a short, sharp email, maybe with links if they want to know more. You shouldn't present it all in just one big data dump, but it should have an ability, if they're interested in the finances, there should be a line where they can click to find out more. If they're interested in the academics or the virtual tours, there should be something that they can click on for that. Even in the most, comprehensive email, if you manage it nicely, it's still small, manageable, and bite-sized with a little practice.
Yes. No, and I think it's also important to think about, I think it's 80% of all students read the mails on their phone. So that's also something to think about when you think about how long it should be.
Right now, there's a lot of universities with wonderful, beautiful email responses that load terribly on mobile. Just such a small, quick win, potentially.
Okay, so yes, I think we've talked about these lead nurturing examples as well already. Just to repeat, it's very important for you to be calling your leads if you have the resources to do that. Do virtual campus tours, webinars, and online masterclasses to get that emotional connection with the candidates. And also for them to meet current students and get more authentic view on how it is, as well as the Q&A with alumni. So I want to have a look at this. So as we discussed, calling the leads are essential for improving and maximizing your recruitment potential. But we know that it's time consuming and that a lot of people don't really like doing it. And we did a survey with our customers and saw that only 11% actually call their leads. However, 85% wish to call their leads. So this tells us that the majority of our customers, they don't really have time or resources to follow up with their leads. What do you think when you see these numbers, Chris?
I'm not surprised by how many are actively calling. and that they want to. I'm almost surprised that more wish that they could call, because I think that there's a lot of reluctance actually to call. I've personally found that more than 15% of institutions I've worked with have been very reluctant to call because it's seen as too aggressive and pushy. And I think the best way of thinking about this is to say that you should proactively reach out to students. That does not mean that you're calling them 5 hours a day to sell them, Bitcoin investments. I mean, we're still education institutions. We still are respectable. We still have a lot of gravitas with the applicants. And if you're convinced that you're adding value, then it should be a no-brainer to reach out to the students. Because if you are adding value, then that's the job. If you think that you're spamming them, and if you're harassing students and forcing them to do something, then there's serious problems there. But we a good admissions process adds value. Therefore, you should reach out to give them that value.
Yeah.
We touched on this very briefly, but again, I think I mentioned that calls are seen as quite aggressive in some markets. I know that the classic, I am probably questions about this in the Q&A right now, but there's already, oh, it's very aggressive in my market, or it's seen as very pushy, and does it send the wrong signals, and all these types of questions. If it's done properly, and if it's done by adding value, no, I've never heard a single complaint saying you're adding too much value to me. I'm finding out too much about your institution now. If you're just sort of spamming them reminders saying, hey, your application is now 12 days old, here's an automated reminder to please complete, that is not adding value. So calling them or WhatsApping them or using social media to reach out, finding how they want to engage you and then engaging them is a net win for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Talking about the calling, and that a lot of our customers really want to reach out to the leads. I want to mention that we have a recruit team that I manage here at Keystone, and they are student recruitment consultants. And they have all been international students themselves and are deeply passionate about international education. And they speak 8 different languages and work across all time zones. And this is, of course, much more efficient, cost efficient and efficient than hiring an additional person to your team for sales and recruitment. And we also have Recruit Pro version that is being launched this week. So we will have the team nurture all leads all the way through completed application. So our customer can outsource this whole entire recruitment process. Do you see the value, Chris, in having someone doing this that is an expert, that has done this, has been an international student, know the process, and is also working for multiple schools and can apply those best practices?
Just on the basis that I was once the inexperienced person with no history of doing this, and I remember how effective I was, I would say yes. In these concepts that we talked about today, for some institutions, still quite new. Conversely, there are those who this has been done for the last 10, 15 years. So there's a lot of expertise and knowledge out there. Maybe the business schools were ahead of the game a little bit, so they're generally a little bit more proactive and focused when it comes to this, and that's filtering down now. But it doesn't mean you have to start from scratch. I don't recommend starting from scratch in almost anything that you can avoid doing it. It's a huge investment of time. There's so many quick wins and easily avoided mistakes. I've made more mistakes in student recruitment than I'd like to care to remember. And I'm sure the same goes for your organization and team. Let somebody skip those. I would say let somebody work out, okay, calling people and hiring a calling team is not working because everyone hates it, so let's instead do X, Y, and Z, or whatever the learning is. Skipping this step is the way forward for me. So yeah, use the experts.
Perfect. And do you have any other ideas on how you could efficiently nurture leads with limited resources? Because we see a lot of our customers, it's not a huge recruitment team, you know, with telesales and admissions people. It's one or two people doing everything, and that's of course very, very challenging. How can these type of teams make sure that they get the best out of the leads they have?
I think that, so automation with CRM, critical. Again, it underpins everything. But I think transparency and routine. I'm always thinking about how I teach my kids now. You know, I can try and start from, you know, the beginning every day and try to manage their time, but letting people know what's coming, being very transparent with the process, and having simple routines. Again, talking to a student ad hoc, you could spend your entire day, you could spend 2 days every day doing nothing else, but setting up a time that's very clear, even on the website, saying, this is where we engage with students. It's at this day, every week or this month, every single, you know, these are the times, here is when you can do this. Giving people structure and giving people, you know, how they can work with it saves a huge amount of time, because then you're not running around keeping 50 plates spinning, trying to remember, oh, these, you know, 10 people that have applied, oh, and there's this fair and the people that I need to follow up from the fair, and how do I remember and collate all that data? Just if you, for yourself, for your mental sanity, I think if you compartmentalize, if you give structure to yourself and to the students, I think everybody wins. And then you can start following up, even with limited resources, because you can specialize each of your days.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question. We have covered a lot of questions during the webinar as well. But let's take one more. So how has the pandemic affected lead nurturing?
I would say it shouldn't have affected lead nurturing. It probably has for some people, but I can tell you it's definitely not affected lead nurturing for some other people. So if they've had a robust application process where they've already had really good, you know, if they've got a good CRM system, and if they've been reaching out, and if they've already organized their websites nicely and their virtual tours, and if everything's in place, not much is the honest answer. I think the institutions that have been caught napping and the ones who have struggled, who are the ones who have tried to then build all of these things during the pandemic, and that's, you know, chaos and anarchy. I mean, I remember even in the UK, there was a lot of institutions who just couldn't get people set up for remote working. Some of the more commercially aggressive institutions had no difference whatsoever. From all through last year, it was like clockwork. Some of the Russell Group universities that weren't used to thinking commercially or proactively about their students, they were still trying to send people, you know, Nokia phones to their admissions staff in August. It was anarchy. So yeah, I don't think it's changed anything, except it's made everyone be a little bit more, you know, get a little bit more on board.
Thank you so much, Chris. Okay, our time is up, unfortunately, and I want to thank everyone for joining our webinar. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that you have as well. And I hope to see you all in our next webinar in March, and we will focus a bit more on messaging and communication strategy. And thank you so much, Chris, for joining this webinar. It was great. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.